to, and I saw such a difference in the young people there because his parents were leading that. I was wanting to know the Lord, and I remember at one of those studies saying a prayer. I thought I accepted Jesus as my Savior that night in that prayer group. But now as I'm older and I look back, I know that I actually accepted Christ when I was very young. The church I went to in Norwood was alive and thriving when I was young. They had a great youth group, and they had Bible school, they had Sunday school, and even the school had a fitness club. So I had all kinds of information coming to me about the Lord. And one Sunday morning, I went forward at that church. So looking back, I know that night at that Bible study, I actually recommitted myself to the Lord. He was calling me into a deeper relationship with Him, and that's what I did at that point. I heard the message, and I accepted Christ young, and I never looked back. But looking forward, always wanting to serve the Lord. So that was on September 26, 1972, when I was a teenager at that Bible study that his parents led.
That's what we looked like back then. She's so good. My hair. And good looking knees.
You were taller than too.
So that group, that Bible study group, was also a singing group. And we would sing at nursing homes, other churches, VBSs to the young people. I mean, his parents were very instrumental in our growth as Christians. So if you're not working with young people, or if you are really speaking into their lives, because I think of all the people who spoke into my life all the time. So, Don, you and I got married August 2nd, 1975. So, do you remember what time we got married?
You know, actually, this isn't a setup because I don't really know, but I told you, I think it was around 1 p.m.
So that would be a good question, right?
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. It was 5 o'clock. Do you remember where we got married?
Yes.
Where?
First Mennonite Church in Morton.
I think it was Grace Mennonite.
Okay, Grace Mennonite. That's a Mennonite church.
It was a Mennonite church.
We were Mennonites.
About that.
So we used the church.
Well, the Mennonite church back then, the one that I went to, I mean, it was actually more Baptist, really. I mean, they preached the word, and not that Mennonites don't, I don't mean to imply that. But anyway, after a couple of years of being married, we wanted to start a family. So Psalm 127 says, "Behold, children are a gift from the Lord." Well, our gifts arrived really slowly, and it took us 2 years before we got pregnant. So I want to encourage any of you who maybe you had problems getting pregnant, or you're struggling now, or you know someone who has had problems getting pregnant. Hang in there. God has a plan for you, whether it is to have children naturally, or adopt, or foster parent. God has a plan, and maybe children aren't even in the plan. We thought we would have 4 children. Well, God said no, and we have 2. He blessed us with 2. Believe me, He knew what He was doing. 2 was what I could handle. So when God says 2, you know that's the right thing. So whatever circumstances, always remember, no matter what, God is the one who chooses and directs your life. But our life together hasn't always been easy. We've had some challenges along the way and some struggles.
So a lot of them went around my employment history. I've had I've had 14 different employers. I might even be some other guy here that I've known for a long time. But two of them, one was 16 years ago.
He raised the bar
20 years.
on you.
36 of the 50 years. I've been working for 50 years. It was during that time that, and the first, I've only been fired once so far.
I've never been fired.
And that was the first job I had. It was totally unfair, and I was wrong. I got fired. And so I moved on a few jobs later. I ended up at Caterpillar in KK, East Peoria, making some type of engine part. I don't even know what engines are, but this was a part I was working on. So I was running a machine and figured I'd retire from there. And this lady came up to me, of course I bought a cat hat, and said, don't wear that hat indoors or you're going to lose your hair. I said, yeah, right. I don't know if that was circumstantial, coincidence. Anyway, but after 5 years here, I got laid off. And I started some struggles because, we thought that the cat job was pretty secure. So all of a sudden we weren't. So I worked for a while as a security guard at a hotel downtown. That was interesting. And then I sold vacuum cleaners.
Wow.
And then I got a chance for a career type of job opportunity, but I had to go to a trade school for a year in Minnesota. So I took that. So to move to Minnesota, it was going to be really hard because we weren't able to rent our house out here. So we were paying our mortgage in Peoria and renting an apartment in White Bear Lake, Minnesota. And so we weren't making it. So my dad, he actually had a lot on a lake in Groveland area that he was going to build a cabin on someday. Well, he sold that to make our mortgage payments. So we made it through that. It was hard, very hard. I worked before school. School was 8 hours a day, 4 hours class, 4 hours lab, type of thing. And then we actually experienced a real blizzard. If you've never been in a blizzard, if you think like if you just lived in Peoria area or something, these aren't blizzards. This is a blizzard up there, and it was incredible. They had 114 inches of snow the winter we were there. And our car was outside. And so that was interesting to go through all that. But, the Lord provided for us so much. But then something happened shortly after we were up there. Rosie did take in some babysitting in our apartment. And we'd gone to church like once at White Bear Lake, giving Jellicoe Free Church. And so we just met the pastor, and some other stuff had happened too. But I also then got a job at night at Kmart. Okay, so I worked before school and still got a job because we weren't making it. And it was working in the hardware department, whatever, to mix paint. So I did mix some lady's paint. I'm sorry where that lady is because I had no clue what I was doing, but I had to act like it. But then that night, I get home and I notice, the wife here is acting a little bit spacey. Okay, something don't seem right. So anyway, it's like I didn't know what to expect. We go to bed. In the middle of the night, she sits up in bed and she's totally seizing. She's even foaming at the mouth. I mean, I don't know if people did that. She did. She didn't have rabies. But it's just, every muscle in her body was firing. And so I'm totally freaking out. Kind of smacking her on the face a little bit and yelling, Rosie, what's going on? So, and then our kids come in and climb into bed. And it was pretty bad. And so I went and called my dad. Didn't know what else to do. And he said that she's probably having a mental breakdown. Wonderful. Now my wife's going nuts. And, I got these kids, I got school, I'm broke, and now she's going to be in an asylum somewhere. So we went through my heart. So then I thought, okay, I better do something. So I called 911. Now, in the meantime, she still had, so she finally quits foaming at the mouth thing, and now she's just staring like a catatonic state. It was, you could do anything, there was no motion. Oh my God. So, police, fire, and EMTs all show up. They're in our bedroom. They're going through our medicine medicine cabinet, drawers. Hey, you know, we're not on any drugs or anything. This is just the way we are. So, she came to, and they started saying like, do you know who, you know, to me, who I am? No. And how about you know who the kids were? So why don't you tell the rest of it?
So that day, I could tell something was happening in my body. And I remember I was on the phone talking to my sister-in-law, and she was here in Peoria. And I knew kind of who she was, but I saw the kids, and they were 2 and 4 at the time, sitting at the dining room table, and I was just at a loss. I know I'm responsible for these little beings, but I really couldn't figure out what was going on. I didn't know really who they were. And so that night, I had a grand mal seizure. I'm not epileptic. That was the only time it ever happened. Right now?
Okay. This one, I know what happened was, I didn't tell what happened. So then they go like, okay, she's having a seizure, we need to get her to the hospital. Of course, we had no health insurance, no money. So we went downstairs, there was a couple lived in an apartment under ours that we had just met, and he was a seminary student. So, okay, Christian guy, knock on the door. Can you watch my kids? I take my crazy wife to the hospital, whatever. So they go, yeah. So we left our kids there. We didn't really know them, but so I followed the ambulance to the hospital, and then the neuro guy came in and checked her over. This went all through the night till halfway the next morning, and they determined it was a grand mal seizure. And he said, you know, she'd be better off, I think, if you took her around her normal surroundings back home. And don't drive, take a train. Take a train. So I didn't know there was a train from Minneapolis to Bloomington, I guess, at the time, but I checked into it. I said, So then, also, how are we going to pay for this? Well, the lady came in and said there was a grant that covered everything. So we didn't have to pay any hospital bills. And
So after getting out of the hospital, or actually when he came home that day before I had the seizure, I said, if we have the money comes in. Sorry, but could we go home? I knew I needed to come here to Peoria to be with my family. God answered that prayer. That day, we got enough money in the mail from our Sunday school class at Grace Presbyterian Church for a train trip home.
Praise
And we
God.
were able to leave the next day on the train and bring me home to be with my family. And it took me several weeks before I could answer questions correctly. I went to church to see my Sunday school class that Sunday, and a good friend of mine was standing next to me, and somebody asked, "Hey, Rosie, how old are your kids now?" And I was just like, I made something up. And she just looked at me like, what the heck? But I really couldn't answer questions correctly for a few weeks. I think my dad was even scared of me. But God healed me from whatever happened that night, that day. And he answered the prayer before we even knew we had a need. He sent that money that we needed so desperately to bring us back to family and friends. And I stayed here for a few weeks until I felt confident to go back home. And our good friends then drove me and the boys back home. But all that to say, God meets our needs, doesn't he?
Yes.
Before we even know that we have a need. And so I'll let you
Yeah,
finish.
so I had school, so I had to get back to my job. So I did quit Kmart after one day. They sent me a check for $7.
Oh.
So anyway, flew back and I stayed up there. until she was able to come back up. But get done with the schooling. It was a 12-month course, but it was orchestra on pace. I was highly motivated, and I got done a little for 7.5 months because I needed to get working. Anyway.
One other thing, real quick too, in regards to me having that seizure, the church that we had gone to only once or twice, Don called the pastor, and the pastor's wife had had the exact same thing 2 years earlier. So what a comfort to us to know that, okay, I might not be crazy, at least not totally, but it was such a comfort. I mean, of all the churches we could have went to up there, that pastor could comfort us in knowing his wife went through the same thing, and it was all stress related. Hers was too, and so that's what mine ended up being. So now I'm a counselor, right? Don't hold things in, talk.
Yeah.
Talk to me, talk to pastor, talk to somebody. Don't hold things in.
So we loaded up our U-Haul with our stuff because we had taken furniture up, the apartment wasn't furnished, and then moved back to Peoria, totally broke. Okay? Then I found out the job that I had lined up and went to school for, it was an hourly job, and they were going to pay me $2 less an hour than what they told me.
Oh.
Okay, that's nice. And then they said it's only 36 hours a week. So I got a part-time job selling TVs and appliances at Rim TV for Thursdays and Saturdays. That was fun. And then we took advantage. One of the pastors at Grace found out about us, and we used their food pantry there for several months. He said, "Don't be ashamed about it," and we weren't.
Oh, we snuck in.
We're taking these to somebody that's in need.
Us.
So anyway, and Rosie baked cookies, hundreds and hundreds of dozens of cookies for Peoria Charter Coach that they served on their trips that they took, and she became kind of famous for that. We went through a couple of them, but that was okay. But then, later, I took the job in Arizona on kind of a whim, and that did work out very well. I had a good upside to it. And we, all of a sudden, when we got to travel a lot, I started making a little bit more money, but the company who sent me on, after I was there for a while, represented the company at trade shows and giving lectures to doctors and such. So we had to travel all over the United States, stay at nice places, and get nice places on the company. It was fun. And even some other countries we went to. But in one of the travels, it was right after 9/11, and we went to DC for a conference, and we're flying back. Get to O'Hare, I was under, I don't travel, I stress, okay? I need to be there.
A lot.
So, a little on that time, didn't know if we were going to blow up our plane or whatever. So, we get in O'Hare, and there's like 2 minutes to get to our next gate for the flight to Peoria, okay? So, I said, let's go, let's run, okay? So,
We were younger, much younger.
so take off running. And there was a colleague of mine that was on the trip too, named Roy. So take off running, and I glanced back to see where Rosie was, 80 yards back, laying on the floor in the aisle. So now I'm thinking, make it to the plane or don't? I gotta make it to the plane. So then she could tell I'm like leaning the other way, trying to go. So I did, I ran 2 gates past the gate I needed. Turned back, went back, oh sorry, I just missed it. You gotta kill me. So I was all totally stressed out. So they go like, well, you gotta go out to customer service. So I go out there, I'm all sweaty, and the hair I had, I stuck it out because it was all wet, and I looked like a crazy man. And the lady at the customer service said, let me get a manager. So then,
At that point, Roy and I are backing away from Don at the counter, and we left him there because, he looked like a wild man. He's like, yeah, I'm not with him.
so anyway, I did leave my wife once, which is the only time I think I've done that. But there's a lot more to that story. I'm not going to talk about it now. Anyway, so we're going to get into kind of what helps us through our almost 48 years of marriage, some tips. But, it says, husbands, love your wives as Christ also loved the church. Now, how in the world can I do that? You know, it doesn't seem possible. And it's not without him, but there's some tips here I wanted to go over. So, there's 5 things. Christ's love is a sacrificial love. In Ephesians 5:22, Christ also loved you and gave himself up for us, an offering and a sacrifice to God. So Jesus gave his life for his bride, you know, the church. And it would be noble if sometime we had an opportunity to actually, I'll give my life for you. You know, it's going to be one of us can make it, the other one's dead or whatever, but it's probably not going to happen. An opportunity like that, I hope not. But, you know, will you live sacrificially for your wife? You know, will you die to yourself and your self-interest to put your wife first? Christ's love is a serving love. Mark 10:45. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and give his life as a ransom for many. But Jesus served the church. And, you know, could we ever conceive like the idea of we're praying to the Lord and he's too busy? You know, he's on social media, he's checking something else on his phone, he's checking on some sports scores, or, you know, we're pouring our hearts out, he's daydreaming or thinking about a hobby or something he wants to eat or whatever. No. I mean, he's totally attentive and sympathetic to us, you know, and that's how we are to be with our spouses. So, something I read that I'm still trying to comprehend this, but I think it's good. I'll run it by y'all. The danger for marriages is not that the husband would love another woman more than his wife, it's that he would love himself more than his wife. So that's where the problem comes in. It can come in and cause some issues, and we've done everything we can to avoid that. Number 3 was Christ's love is a faithful love. John 13:1 contains, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. So Jesus is faithful to his church, his bride. And the love of a husband offers his wife is to be committed and a faithful love. Number 4 is Christ's love is an understanding love. Jesus knows us and understands us. Live with your wives in an understanding way, showing honor to the woman as the weaker vessel, so your prayers will not be hindered. There's a lot in there. The pastor can unpack that for us. But, you know, one guy said he's a lifetime student at the University of, in my case, Rosie. You know, I'll never graduate or get a diploma from the University of Rosie, but I'm studying her, and it's a lifetime learning thing. And I'm always trying to learn how to best love and how to serve her. And number 5, Christ's love is an enduring love. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So Jesus doesn't quit on his bride. And for us guys, kind of like a sports analogy, we're supposed to stay on the field. We don't tap out, you know, like some of these football players. They let me out and I'm out of energy or whatever. We're just stay on there and we're supposed to keep working and continue to press on and go to the end. And Jesus motivates us to endure, you know, amid and through hardships. We've all had hardships, like, you know, something like we've had or a lot worse, I'm sure. You know, have I always done these 5 things well? No, not really even close a lot of times. But I'm working on it. I'm aware of what I'm supposed to be doing, and I realize I have to rely on the Lord. And so all these years of, you know, hearing the Word preached, studying it, all that the Holy Spirit is able to work through my life, you know, to help me through all these things. I'm very appreciative of that. I'm sure you are too.
Absolutely. So, ladies, now I want to give you some thoughts, some key factors that I think are important for a successful marriage. And of course, number 1 is having the Lord at the center of your home and of your life. Ecclesiastes 4:12 says, "A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. That is the husband, the wife, and the Lord." But some other components that I think are important, I'd like to share with you too. Number 1, good communication. There is a book that I've used in counseling when I co-counsel couples. 3 chapters on communication. Really, that is like the number 1. Mark 3:25 says, "If a house is divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand." You have to have communication, You can't be fighting against each other. Be a team. Work on agreeing when making decisions. Work together until you come to solutions and agreement. We don't work independently, we work together. Listen. Give your full attention when your spouse is speaking. Husbands, right? Conversations between husband and wife has to be intentional. You have to practice and work at it. So, women typically speak, and I think it was a question who talks the most earlier. Women typically speak about 20,000 words a day, while men speak about 7,000. But you can learn to be a listener, right? So I have even told Don at some point in our marriage, you don't have to talk, just listen. I've got to get my words in. And we do. I mean, I'm seriously about that. So be a listener, but be patient with us. God made us different than you. We talk more typically. The second one, rejoice in your toils. Ecclesiastes 5 says, behold, what I have seen to be good and fitting is to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all toil with which one toils, to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil. This is the gift of God. So we've been studying Ecclesiastes. Plan getaways. I mean, especially for you that have young children and you who are grandparents of those young children, help them get away. When we didn't have money, when we finally started getting a little bit of money, we always made a point to get away one night at least. 2 days, one night, away from the kids. And when the kids were at home, we always did that. Our parents would watch the boys, and we would go, you don't have to go far. I mean, you can just go a couple hours away, or you can just stay in the city. But you need that time together. Rejoice and celebrate your time of working and toiling, just like the verse said. Jonathan Parnell said in an article titled Desiring God, marriage isn't a time for coasting, and it's not. It's when we gear up, when we pursue our spouse in love, when we seek our joy in their joy, and yes, when we spend time together. So even when you're working and have long hours, still take time, make time. It has to be intentional. The third point, what is your marriage dance? I know that might sound strange, and Don would not be the one who would have got the dance on the question. No, he's asked to leave, so.
Okay.
We took dance lessons for Ryan's wedding. They asked him not to come back.
Seriously.
They didn't really
I said there was no hope.
Author Elisa Packard says, I want to be the kind of wife that at the end of our years together, that he'll say, they seem to him but just a few days. Wouldn't that be wonderful? She talks about learning the dance in one of her books, how to creatively learn how to move together in your marriage together, how to enjoy each other's company and be intentional in having fun together. Psalm 34:3 says, oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. In everything you do, make that part of your life. Learn what your marriage dance is. 4, love versus respect. Don talked about love. Let each one of you love his wife as himself. And let the wife see that she respects her husband. See the difference there? Sometimes, ladies, we forget God made them different. And we think we should show them love like they show us love. So a survey done several years ago said typically, if a man feels disrespected, he equates that to being unloved. So when you disrespect your husband, that shows you're unloving to him. Men are called to love their wives, but women, and you probably didn't realize it, you are called to respect your husband. We women have assumed the same thing. They went, we went, but that's not true. God created men to have the desire for their wife to respect them. So how do you show your husband that you respect him? Do you tell him you appreciate him? Do you tell him what his giftedness is? I encourage you to think on those things and do that periodically for your husband. God tells us clearly in Scripture that's what we are to do. So I have a biblical example in the book of Esther, and I might pronounce the name wrong. King Ahasuerus, close enough I guess, was giving a great feast for all his officials and servants. And after many days of celebrating and drunkenness, he sent for Queen Vashti to come. She was to be brought in before all the people at his party, and she was to wear the royal crown. Well, it tells us in that first chapter that she refused. He wanted to show off her beauty because it says that she was lovely to look at. She refused and he became angry. He actually was insulted. Because of her disrespect for the king in front of all the guests, she was banned forever from going before the king again. That's how serious, ladies, men take respect. So someone named Dr. Arthur Lawrence Georges, in his book, in his doctorate project, if you don't know this gentleman, I'll introduce you later. So his doctorate was on the book of Esther. It is incredible. It really is. But he says in there, and I could turn to the page I have it marked, when Vashti publicly humiliates the king through her refusal of his summons to appear before his guest, Ahasuerus issues a royal edict disposing Vashti and putting women throughout the kingdom on notice that perceived insubordination would not be tolerated. That is serious, isn't it? Those are his words. So all women are to give honor to their husbands, high and low alike. Verse 20 in chapter 1. See how deep the respect issue is? She had dishonored and disrespected her husband, not only disrespected him, but she did it in front of many guests. So in summary, I'll end with this. Ecclesiastes 4:12. Again, a cord of 3 strands is not easily quickly broken. Don, Rosie, and the Lord, always having that foundation. And Psalm 127:1, unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. So your home has to be built, your relationship with each other and with the Lord.
Anyway, thanks for listening to us. And I know a lot of these words were our words, and the strength to have a good marriage, of course, are from the words of the Lord. So we just encourage each of you to be students of His Word and to really work on it, because it pays dividends to know you've got a spouse that you can trust, rely on, always going to be there for you, and can't put a price tag on that. So anyway, thank you. I'd like to just close in prayer. Father, thank you for each of these